Welcome to the Educational Physics Podcast. I am your host, João Figueiredo. This podcast is all about education, pedagogy, mindset, and really any other nonsense that I think about during the week. Enjoy. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing, reviewing, or even sharing with your friends. Welcome to another episode of the Educational Physics Podcast. Today I want to follow up on last week's conversation about artificial intelligence, and let's further explore the possibilities and the limitations of incorporating AI into education. So last week I was talking about how we could indeed use artificial intelligence to support students by providing the proximity that they would otherwise potentially not experience if it weren't for AI systems or VR systems. And one of the things that would be quite interesting to also explore is the idea of a teaching assistant powered by an AI. So let's imagine higher education. And if you find yourself in that context, you will notice that it's sometimes not easy to get access to support, academic support. Imagine that you're studying at 2 a.m. in the morning and you have a question about an assignment. Now, a teaching assistant, let alone a lecturer, will never be available at 2 o'clock in the morning, at least not one that you would like to actually speak to. But an AI-powered teaching assistant will not only be available 24/7, but better yet, will know you, and it will have a track record of your questions, how you process those questions and how you consume information. It will have a track record of all your grades, and it will be able to make connections between your results, the way you've done well and not so well in the past, and give you advice that will exactly target the issues that you might be encountering at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Now that's AI for you. It's that beautiful connection and symbiosis between human curiosity and technological power and prowess. AI has that ability to really bring together our ingenuity, our curiosity, but also our inability to sometimes conquer our own self-doubt. AI will know how to speak to you in order to unlock your confidence, so to speak, your self-esteem, your ability to motivate yourself. AI will know what words to use because it will know you. How it gets there to that knowledge, that's yet to be discussed, debated, or even achieved. And there are ethical issues here that need to be considered. Always. But we can't dismiss the possibilities just because of the ethics. I'm a practical mind. I feel like if there's a possibility of human improvement, we should always explore that and then potentially analyze the ethics involved as the process goes along. You might question my approach, and that's okay, but that's sort of what my gut feeling always tells me, that we should explore and push the envelope of our progress and analyze the limits of the ethics of that progress as we go along. Otherwise, we might just define ethics and rules that compromise that progress before it even starts. Now, one of the limits of AI is indeed its inability to perhaps, potentially, for now anyway, empathize. So maybe you're having a really bad day because your grandmother died and you're feeling down. An AI might not know how to motivate you academically whilst still taking that into account. There are a lot of people who would disagree with me, at least on the possibility that that one day will be a thing. I know for a fact, for example, that Lex Friedman has this personal mission, which by the way, I love, and I don't know anything about AI compared to Lex Friedman, so I'm not going to question his ability to conquer this, but he wants to embed the notion of love into artificial intelligence. I'm not sure if that's ever possible. However, speaking philosophically, I do believe that it is possible to program an AI to understand a representation of love. Now, that representation of love will be constructed by understanding the person this AI is aiming to support. Now, that's again one of the benefits of AI, is that it's highly customizable and it learns on its own. All it needs is information and data. And if you provide that data, then the AI will absorb it and it will connect dots over time. Academically speaking and education-wise, this is very, very interesting because an AI has this ability to connect data sources as well. So it's not just going to be using Google, so to speak. It will be using the entirety of the internet. It will be able to fetch from so many data sources that you won't be able to reference enough. Fortunately for you, the AI will also be able to reference everything for you. But reconnecting with the idea of proximity and access, right? The idea of the 24/7 available teaching assistant. Are we then looking at a scenario where AI teachers, AI professors will then become the norm? In other words, why do we need professors, humans as professors? Why? Well, my argument for that, perhaps biased because I am an educator, is that great professors, and I'm going to get to this point in a minute, will have the ability to be creative with their teaching. So great teachers have this ability to read the room, and that's got to do with empathy. It's got to do with the human need for interaction and socialization, and for that we use our empathy and our senses to understand how the other person or persons are indeed receiving our message. So for humans, that is part of an evolutionary process, right? We've evolved to be able to do this because it is to our benefit to understand if our message is coming across positively, negatively. Is this person getting upset with me? An AI machine will struggle a lot more with doing that, especially in a classroom environment. It would be quite difficult for a technology to absorb so many nuanced points of information that is not factual information. It's very subjective information based on body language and so on and so forth. The creativity necessary to teach is a pro in favor of human teachers. Likewise, our ability as humans to engage in philosophical conversation, in metaphysical conversation, in understanding our own consciousness to the extent at which we can do so, but also understanding that we are conscious, understanding that you are conscious, that gives us a superpower because we understand then the depths of our humanity, which includes our mortality. Now that changes everything. AI will only have a concept of death, but it will never experience that or understand that the same way a human does. Does that affect the way we teach? Of course, because we understand what it is to be teaching about the past. So we understand what it is to be teaching about the future. We know that these are all cycles of life and death that will constantly renew themselves, and all we can do is pass on the information we were given. But the emotional weight that we put onto certain subject matters because of our awareness and our self-awareness of our own consciousness and mortality is perhaps unbeatable. That emotional charge is unlikely to be replicable by an AI machine. For more reasons than just simply say the AI machine cannot understand it. Perhaps it even can in the future, not now. But in the future, maybe one day it will be able to understand the emotional charge, but will it be able to convey it? This comes down to the idea of at what point does an AI machine, a robot, even if you will, become so human-like that it's uncanny that we can't tell the difference. Until then, until we reach that point where we can't tell the difference between a human and a robot, those nuances in body language will be very difficult for an AI to replicate. Then this made me think also of one of Elon Musk's projects and companies, Neuralink. And it's not necessarily an AI, although it will be, as far as I'm aware, powered by AI as well, but it is an interface that will be embedded into your body, in this case onto your brain, which will allow you to then do a million things that will be impossible for us to achieve with our exclusively human bodies, or not enhanced human bodies. So Elon Musk even famously said that with Neuralink, one day we will not be able, or rather, we will not be required to communicate out loud. In other words, we will be able to read each other's minds. Now, that sounds insane to you. That's because that is quite insane. It's a tremendously ambitious proposition. But when you think about what that means for education, for instance, how does that benefit students? That we can just transfer information without the friction of language. Because we know language is limiting. Right? Different languages have different words. We've spoken about that in past podcasts. So how does then the existence of an interface that excludes the need for language, how does that benefit education at a global scale? So last week we talked about proximity, bringing AI and VR and AR technologies into education to really provide that interpersonal and very immersive experience of being exposed to an idea, a landscape, a monument, an experience, right? We bring the students to the experience by means of technology, or in other words, we bring the experience to the students. And then with the add-on of no longer requiring language in a way, or at least spoken language, how many doors does that open in terms of human understanding across the world? In my opinion, all the doors will be wide open. We will suddenly find ourselves completely capable, much like in a sort of matrix scenario of just summoning a skill, just summoning a new language. Not because we can actually speak it, but because the interface will immediately translate it by being connected to the internet. Now that gives us tremendous access to borderline infinite amounts of information. By infinite, I mean, the highest number you can count. Well, infinite is the next one. So we won't be able to count the amount of knowledge we can transfer over to each other. That's a fascinating thought. and I'm all for it. The limits, only time will tell. We'll have to deal with the ethics of, the robotization and you know the technocratic world that would be ours if in fact all of these ideas come to fruition. How that will translate in the real world, we don't know. What I do know is that we need to talk about these things now so we can prepare ourselves to accept these realities, to adjust to these realities, to adapt, but also to fine tune and polish these ideas so when we pull the trigger, we don't find ourselves unprepared or surprised by curveballs thrown at us by these unbeatable, unlimited, godlike creatures powered by AI. We need to keep thinking about these ideas deeply and no longer dismiss them as if we're talking about sci-fi. I've been talking about the rise of the robots, which I'm stealing from Martin Ford's book. This rise of the robots that will take away our jobs and our current circumstances. They will create a new world that we can either succumb to or take advantage of. That's up to us. For now, I suggest that we keep on pondering, keep on fine-tuning, keep on being brave enough to discuss these things without feeling like we're just being loopy and unnecessarily visionary. I wish to keep these conversations going. I'm trying to get some guests on the podcast who know way more than I do about AI and can actually answer some of my questions, which I assume are some of your questions. But in the meantime, thank you for once again listening to me. As always, please subscribe to the podcast. It's on Apple Podcasts, it's on YouTube, it's on Spotify, the old spiel. In the meantime, take care guys and learn better. Bye-bye.